Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Dawn Tura, President and CEO of Sourcing Industry Group, also known as SIG. And I'm just excited that you joined us today. We know by the number of registrations that this is a hot topic. So let me just go through some housekeeping items before we jump into the body. So a couple things, in this virtual world that we're living in right now and the fact that we can't all get together, make sure that you're connected with us on our LinkedIn, all of our different channels, our Twitter. We solve a lot of peer-to-peer problems using our social media. So please make sure that you join me personally, but also follow SIG in all these different channels as well. And then we like to take SIG out to you, so we've got our global and regional events, and as soon as we can make them in person, they will be again. But in the meantime, I'm going to tell you about a couple of the events that are coming up that will be virtual. We also have our weekly webinar series, so it's always a great opportunity to get trained from your desk. We have the peer-to-peer resources where you can actually send in questions and we will socialize it with about 35,000 different procurement folks to get answers for you. And then, of course, access the SIG Resource Center with 5,000 tools, templates, you name it, white papers, RFPs, RFIs, RFQs, past webinars, it's all there. And then the Career Network. If you're looking for a new job, go there. But if you also are posting and you're hiring, please send it to us. It's our most often hit page with over 10,000 views per month. So we want to get you the right people, and if they come from the SIG community, you already know that they're going to be good hires. So also we have a partnership with PeopleTicker. PeopleTicker is a tool that you should know about because you get a very, very steep discount by being a SIG member. You can access job rates, hourly or salary, in thousands of cities for thousands of titles all around the world. So now that people are realizing that remote workers are good, why don't you see what you might be able to pay if you have someone in a different location than where your headquarters is? Or why don't you go out there and use this to benchmark when you're posting your jobs? And most of our members say that they're saving millions of dollars, which is really important right now, by saving $5 on average per hour for every single staff augmentation person that they have by using this tool. So a great tool out there and a steep discount for SIG members. Also, we have our partnership with Spend Matters. Now, we're going to be talking about a technology platform today, and we know Spend Matters is really, really high on them. But they also review all of the other technologies, over 75 technologies that are in our space. You also get a very steep discount by being a SIG member to access all of their reports. So take advantage of it, please. And then as we bring SIG out to you around the globe, we've started our CPO and Executive Virtual Series. Our first one is next week. So these are capped, and we'd like to keep the attendance to 15. So we'll take a waiting list, and I think it might be full, but check back. Next one will be July 15th, August 12th, September 16th. And then on the 17th, we're going to have a full-day regional event, and it used to be our Eastern Regional. Now it is our September event. It's a full-day event, so you don't have to be on the East Coast to attend. It's going to have all of the bells and whistles that our summit had. You're going to feel like you're there with us. We're sending out gift cards for you to be able to buy your lunch and have lunch with us as if we were there together. And then October 1st, we have decided that our Western Regional is now virtual as well. We are still up in the air about the Fall Summit, as all of you know. We're all looking at when we can get back on the road, but we will announce as soon as that one goes virtual. And then as we make the decision, we'll be updating our website. So the great thing is you have unlimited attendance since it's on a virtual platform, so you can bring your entire staff to come get educated. And we'll start each of our regional events off with an executive roundtable portion in the morning. And while we are with you guys, the executives, in the other room, they're going to be getting training for 2.5 hours by industry experts. So it's a great opportunity to continue your education. And then talking about education, are you certified? Now, I am so excited, but we now have about 7 or 8 global 1,000 companies that this is one of the first things they ask when they're interviewing people. Do you have a SIG certification? So we have courses around sourcing, certified sourcing professional, supplier management, which is more around the governance of contracts, third-party risk management, boy, do we need that one now, and intelligent automation. These are courses that you can follow at your own pace, and they are completely online. And I tell you, we now have thousands of CSPs, and we have created a global language of sourcing. It's in over 17 countries. Over 150 companies have participated. If you work for Honda, PwC, MUFG, Bank of New York Mellon, you name it, the very first thing you do, even if you've got 20 years of experience, is you go through SIG University. So it's a great program, and I am very high on education. We all have to be educated. We all have to be learning on a daily basis. So join us at SIG University. Now, the reason you're here is because you wanted to hear from Scout, a Workday company. So let me tell you a little bit about Scout and then about Uber, who is here today too. So I was telling them before we started, Scout is the only company that was a member of SIG where everybody waxes poetic about it. It's always, we love Scout. Oh my gosh, we love the people at Scout. Scout is so great. So I'm always thrilled when Scout wants to do a webinar because I get to brag on them since they won't brag on themselves. But I love that. So I think you're really going to like what you hear today. So presenting today, we have, a safe harbor statement. You can read that at your leisure. I'll leave that up there while I introduce to you our new speakers. Ahmad Jawani is here, and he's a product marketing manager for Scout RFP, which is a Workday company. In this role, he leads the direction and execution of go-to-market activities, including product messaging, positioning, and launch for the Scout RFP platform. Prior to this role, Ahmad led the product marketing function at Workday for their spend management solution portfolio. So a really great person to be learning from. And with him today is Roopa Radhakrishnan, and she is a marketing sourcing manager at Uber Inc., where she leads a number of strategic marketing negotiations globally. Roopa has previously led marketing sourcing for creative and research categories. Prior to Uber, she spent 6+ years at Anthem Inc., building out scalable sourcing and supplier collaboration initiatives. So I want to welcome the two of you. I'm so excited that you joined us today for the webinar. And one more piece of information. On the lower right-hand corner, you can open up your Q&A. At least that's where it's on my screen. If you have questions, we will attempt to get to all the questions at the end. And so what we will do is make sure that our speakers follow up with you afterward if we don't get to your questions. So just keep them coming, and we'll make sure to give them to our presenters if we don't get to all of them today. And yes, we are going to push a copy of today's deck at the end of the presentation, so you have to be online. And then tomorrow we'll send you a link to the recording so you can share it with everybody, because I know you're going to like what you heard. So now I'm actually going to hand it over to Roopa and Ahmad. Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Dawn, especially for those opening remarks about Scout. We're very excited to be here today as we take a closer look at the supplier relationship management functionality in Scout and how Uber is leveraging the Scout platform for their SRM program as well. So for our session today, we're going to have Roopa kick things off by providing some background on Uber along with their SRM initiative, including their use of supplier performance evaluations and scorecards. I'll then provide a quick overview of the supplier management functionality within Scout that can allow you to better engage with and manage your suppliers. And we'll wrap up with some closing remarks before we head into our Q&A portion to address any questions that you may have. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Roopa.
Dawn and Ahmad for the intro. It's nice to be here and presenting on a topic, I'm very passionate about. A little bit about myself. I've been at Uber for about 3.5 years on our marketing sourcing side. We have about 50 people on our sourcing team, with our marketing sourcing team having a lean and mighty group of just myself and my counterpart, Scott Kane, who leads our creative sourcing team. We are always open to benchmarking, so please feel free to connect with us if you're interested. And with that, I'll kind of dive into the topic at hand. So, as most of you know, Uber is a ride-sharing service, and we're not just a ride-share service anymore. We've evolved over the last several years into a platform servicing private rides, shared rides, food delivery, freight, and so much more. So we started about 11 years ago and have kind of grown rapidly ever since. And I think one thing to really call out with Uber is that our scale is global, which has caused us to have, hyper growth. Recently, we have gone through some kind of incredible shifts in our business model. With the coronavirus pandemic, we've seen a major downward shift in the rides business. Less people on the road means that we don't have as many rides, and with drivers, they don't have as many trips. But interestingly enough, while that's kind of taken a large hit, our Eats business and freight business has kind of seen hyper growth. And in fact, our Eats business has, grown 4x in consumption during this last quarter. So it's been a really interesting time to be here. And I can say that our business is kind of always evolving. And I think, just with a company like this, we move fast and there's always something new to learn. So if we kind of move on here, a little bit about kind of our timeline and our history. How did Uber grow? So we started off as a startup. We moved fast within the rides platform, first across the U.S., then across EMEA, LATAM, and later into the rest of the world. We've made kind of incredible waves of change in how movement works in our cities, across countries, and just generally market to market. So how does a business, that you can see has scaled so quickly from 2009 to now really handle hypergrowth? When you see kind of so much has to be achieved from a business standpoint, getting us up and running, we have to just move fast. And I think there's a good reason why we're talking about this today. And I think it really involves external partners getting us there. So our supply base is kind of a critical part to how we've grown, how we've evolved. And that's really what we'll talk about today. So Ahmad, would you like to kind of go over the poll question?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Roopa. So I'll quickly jump in here to present our first polling question. We'd love to get a better sense of where you're at in your supplier relationship management journey and level set as well so that all attendees have visibility into this. So it would be great if you could use the polling functionality to the right of the WebEx console to provide your responses. So the possible options for responses are A, we're looking to start or define our program. B, we're in the beginning phases, but we may need help scaling. C, our program is scalable, but we'd love to hear more tips. Or D, our SRM program is top-notch. So we'll go ahead and give you about 30 to 45 seconds to get all of your responses in.
So Ahmad, what are you expecting, and not to sway the answer, but what do you think the answers will be predominantly?
I would imagine that most folks might be, maybe B, beginning phases. Some might even be looking to start or define their program. There are some examples where we hear from customers that they truly feel like their program is at a point where it's, it's fairly robust and scalable. But for the most part, I think we're maybe expecting between A and B.
And look at that. The results are there.
But let's see.
That is an interesting split.
That's very interesting. So we did get the most, 37% said looking to start or define their program. But, in second highest response was C, our program is scalable, but would love to hear more tips. So that's really great that folks are a little bit further along in terms of scaling and optimizing that process. So really, really great to see that. Roopa, anything you'd like to add here before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see results like this. And I think that the biggest thing that I've learned kind of in building out the SRM practice at Uber is really take it step by step, right? So start really just testing out how to implement SRM with a few key strategic suppliers and grow it from there. It's really about recognizing where you'll get the most value, where you'll give the most value to the business with those key suppliers. So take it step by step.
Great. All right. Well, let's move on then.
Wonderful. So, there's a lot of benefit to supplier relationship management, and I think if you look at what's listed here, right, these are some of the reasons why it was really important to Uber. And we started this initiative at Uber to support our most strategic supplier relationships and understand ways we can derive more value, long-lasting and stronger ties to our business partners while achieving, the best relationships possible with our suppliers as well. And I think it was kind of a coupled approach. How do you ensure that you're getting, to a better place with your stakeholder and your supplier at the same time? It was a way, for us at Uber to really focus on securing maximum transparency, value, and opportunity with our key strategic suppliers. And I think most of all, it was something our business asked for. They wanted to know how they can evaluate their supply base during or after large-scale projects or contracts. I think, SRM was a key solution to that. And while I think we thought about SRM in the past, we really had to, again, take that leap into identifying how it would be best driven for our company. If you see here, you'll see kind of a very standard segmentation model, and I really believe that segmentation is the first and most crucial step of SRM. If you can successfully kind of segment your supply base by category, then you have the ability to understand which suppliers you should be focusing your energy, your time, and your SRM program on. Obviously, you can see here, we have a 4-tier segmentation model, and we focus our efforts at Uber primarily on our most strategic suppliers, so Tier 1 and a little bit of Tier 2 as well. My understanding is that for organizations of Uber size and scale, you should keep your strategic suppliers to a maximum of 50 vendors or less, really to scale your SRM program correctly. And I think what I've heard and kind of a lot of the conversations that I've had with other leaders doing SRM in their own companies, the tighter control you have on the number of suppliers who are strategic are probably going to yield them, you're probably going to have the most influence because you can really put your time, your energy, your sourcing team's energy towards those key strategic suppliers, understanding how to move the needle, how to make them the best business partner possible. So if we move on to, after you've kind of done a segmentation process, you've gone through, evaluating your supplier, what does that supplier evaluation really yield? Well, this is actually what you'll see in Scout after a supplier evaluation is completed. And I'll tell this group it's actually very beneficial to have this type of a layout in Scout because what we like to do on our end is we literally just copy and paste a section like this and the scores and drop them into pre-populated performance review decks with the supplier. From there, this information really helps drive the conversation with the supplier. We can double click into each of the sections, bringing up specific topics or speaking points to get an idea of how to continue to build a better partnership. So I really like this model because you can take a screenshot of the full view as it's done here. You can take a screenshot of each of the individual sections. And again, that really just helps to drive the conversation forward. And more than anything, I feel like it actually creates for a two-sided, a two-way conversation. It's not just the business, it's also the supplier who's providing value. One thing to note on this specific scorecard is Scout has recently also implemented a supplier score as well. So suppliers can actually also score the different sections. And this is a slightly outdated scorecard, but you can actually see what the business scores against what the supplier scores. And it's a really great way to kind of say, okay, how is the business feeling about, where we are today, and how is the supplier feeling? And that makes way for great conversation. Also, one more thing to note about Scout on the segmentation piece is, today at Uber, we currently do our segmentation outside of Scout RFP. We actually, work within our categories. So within marketing or IT, professional services, facilities, et cetera, each sourcing group actually goes in and segments their supply base. But I believe that Scout RFP also has the ability segment internally within the tool. So that is something that, may be able to be explored. Yeah, so I think, there's been a journey with Uber, and I can't say that we're doing SRM correctly, the best of the best today, but we're doing something today. So I'll walk you through a little bit of the history around, how SRM really evolved at Uber. And, historically, we didn't have an SRM solution in place. I think it was something that we craved, we needed. About 2 years ago, we were really doing something very different. Each category was handling SRM in a different manner through Google Sheets, potentially not kind of keeping very standardized criteria in place. So we found that need to really shift over to something that is streamlined, that is standardized, and that's really where Scout came in. Today, we've done SRM events with about 20 suppliers across multiple categories, and I think that's continuing to increase, if not has already maybe gone to 30 at this point. We've gone from a very fragmented process to a functional templated approach on how to build an SRM process for the supplier. So what's really needed in order to initiate driving the entire process from start to end. And I think I'll touch on this a little bit later, but as much as you can templatize your entire SRM solution and framework, making sure that whether it's the sourcer or the stakeholder who's really running your SRM, you should be able to give them all of the information at their fingertips so that they can run something successfully. And really, what do we see in the future, right? So we hope that we can continue to just build out the SRM process for all strategic suppliers. Our goal is really to see that every single strategic supplier goes through this type of a process over the next couple of years. And I think while we're still, a ways away from that, we're taking, a step-by-step approach really to get there. So now I'll hand it over to Ahmad for another poll question.
Okay, thank you, Roopa. So one more polling question here. We'd like to understand, when you're looking at your overall SRM journey or your programs, what is your most strategic driver? So again, please use the polling functionality to the right of the WebEx console. And here we have 3 responses for you to choose from. So A, better negotiations with suppliers, B, driving incremental cost savings, and C, improving supplier quality, delivery, and risk. So we'll go ahead and give you about 30 seconds to go ahead and answer those. So Roopa,
yes.
Curious to see if you have...
No, go ahead.
Sorry, what was that, Don?
I said go ahead and ask Roopa your question.
Oh, no, I was actually just going to see if Roopa had a take on where she thought the responses were, or where she thought the majority of responses would be.
Yeah, Ahmad, I actually do. So when I was reading this poll question, to me, I actually think all of them have been strategic drivers for SRM at Uber. And I know that's an interesting approach, but definitely I've seen a little bit of all of it, and I think they all kind of play a key role.
Well, there you go. So it looks like majority of responses, 45%, came on C, which makes sense with, in recent times. And then 39% voted B, driving incremental cost savings and value contribution. So that's great. Great to see.
Great. Wonderful. So, just to kind of touch on a little bit more around how we've been able to partner with the business. So I think there's been some really successful, I think Uber is a very successful use case in terms of how to leverage SRM to get closer to your business partner. What we've noticed is it's not just supported the business partner, but we've also been able to kind of create a deeper connection and relationship to our suppliers as well, right? So we've seen longer lasting relationships with our suppliers. It's been a way to go back and track how we've been able to work with suppliers and their scores from the past, right? So looking at historical data over time in terms of how they've been evaluated and see how, we continue to move the needle with their progress and performance. And then, understanding trends with certain categories or suppliers that could help drive our need, for RFPs. So I actually think that the poll question from the previous poll question was really interesting because we've actually even used SRM to understand, is the supplier performing to a point where we actually need to reconsider who our partner is. And so, it's geared us up correctly for a potential RFP or a potential renegotiation, something along those lines. So it's been really eye-opening to actually get this data and see everything we can do with it. More than anything, I think we've been able to develop closer ties between sourcing and the business to really launch and conduct these, conduct SRM and business review meetings. I think it really gives sourcing a seat at the table. Keeping this information from an Uber standpoint, we keep the information in Scout so we can see the historical data with all of our suppliers that we are running these SRM evaluations with. And we can look at how they're performing, and it's a great opportunity to have very strategic discussions with the business partner, and they are really kind of coming in and really valuing our response to a lot of maybe potential shifts that we have with those suppliers. So it's been an eye-opening, exciting process to kind of build and implement here at Uber. And I think more to come in terms of the impact we can make with our strategic suppliers, but definitely can already see the value and the results that are being driven. With that, I will hand it back over to Ahmad.
Great. Thanks, Roopa, for all the great insights that you shared on your SRM program. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes to provide just an overview of the capabilities within Scout. So as many folks may know, Scout was founded just over 5 years ago after the founding members went out and interviewed over 300 procurement experts to truly understand all the pain points within the sourcing process. And with that feedback, we first introduced the sourcing module in the middle, which was, really around managing all of your RFX events, your reverse auctions, and so on, but doing so in a very simplified and streamlined fashion to cut down traditional cycle times associated with manual processes or legacy tools, and in a way that brings the most impact to the business. And the Scout leadership team then quickly identified some additional requirements in both the upstream and downstream parts of the process. So the results of that, if you look at the left part of the slide, so around our intake module, which is really our ability to allow business stakeholders to submit sourcing project requests and, have them drive that level of accountability to understand where those projects are in queue without having to manually follow up with sourcing and procurement, as well as our pipeline module as well, which is really kind of our project management tool for sourcing, where they can track, prioritize, and manage all of their key sourcing projects. And then if we look more at the downstream part of the process, there were some requirements around contracts. So today we have a contracts module that really acts as a single repository for all procurement-related contracts. And then at the further right of the slide, really our focus area for today is really around the supplier piece. So this really includes your supplier onboarding and the ability to collect and assess information from suppliers to ensure compliance, but then also supplier performance. So being able to, as we've heard from Roopa, being able to develop scorecards, participate in business reviews, set action items in place for suppliers, and so on. And just a couple of the things I want to call out here is that across the platform, we have a robust set of reporting tools because everything that gets entered into Scout can be reported on. And we also have the ability to integrate with other tools like Tableau and Power BI for more advanced BI and visualizations. But then we also understand that you have a need to share data with maybe some of your other P2P systems, your back office ERP systems. And so we have a robust set of APIs that allow you to do that as well. So if we double click on just specifically the SRM capabilities within Scout, as I mentioned previously, this is really divided into two areas, so your supplier onboarding and your performance management. And the onboarding piece is really designed to seamlessly gather data from your suppliers, receive approval and sign off from key internal stakeholders, and be able to save completed data and information within forms within the context of a supplier profile, so that you have a complete form history and visibility into all of that information. And supplier forms, they can be incorporated into any project or contracts that you may be creating within the platform. So, whether you're trying to either pre-qualify suppliers during an RFP, or maybe you're gathering information about your supplier's environmental impact, for example, you can gather that valuable information through a convenient and streamlined process. And then forms can easily be sent to suppliers for them to complete. And once they've done so, your team can then evaluate those responses and choose to approve or reject those forms. And then for performance management, as Roopa touched on throughout the presentation, this can really help your organization move beyond purely transactional supplier management to something far more strategic. And as we've heard, Scout really gives you the capability to create and track their progress in the form of scorecards and performance reviews, and this was ultimately, of course, in one central location. So this is really helping procurement and sourcing teams to be able to quickly assess, where relationships stand with some of your key suppliers, have insight into, again, where action items or development plans may be in place to improve supplier relationships. And then, of course, easily managing reviews or perhaps changing suppliers if you have the need to, or if you have newer requirements. And one other thing I just wanted to speak to here, when we think about the principles in which our platform is really based on, we're really focused on driving efficiency so that you can easily collaborate with stakeholders across the business, and especially in these certain times, be able to handle disruption, with having, a clear view into your suppliers and obligations on the visibility side, but then also ensuring adoption as well to ensure rapid time to value. And what's really great with Scout, and what we love to talk about on the Scout side, is really just the value that our customers are experiencing, because that's ultimately of the utmost importance. And there's just a couple of quick value points here. So 97% of our customers see a 10x ROI within the first year of using Scout, but then just about 90% see an overall positive impact to their bottom line. So this is really, really great to see these kind of results within our broader community of customers. So that was just, just a quick overview of the Scout platform, some of the modules within, supplier relationship management. But now I'm going to turn things back over to Roopa just to make a few additional remarks before we bring things to close.
Great, thanks, Ahmad. So, I mentioned a couple of these things earlier, but I would say that there's a few learning lessons I think Uber had over kind of the course of implementing SRM within our organization, and I've listed them here. But one of them is really templatize as much as you can in order to create this consistency across all of your different SRM events. Since for us, there was a lack of consistency in the past in terms of, the same supplier was evaluated differently every single time. And so how did we actually standardize and streamline all of the different criteria and the questions we were asking and just the entire process? So we literally templatized all of it, and everything from the emails you send to the suppliers, to the stakeholders, the actual evaluation template within Scout RFP. We've templatized the deck that you use for actually leveraging the performance review meeting after you've completed the evaluation and are ready to take that step in, in having that conversation with the supplier. So a lot of this has been templatized, and I think hugely beneficial because we see how conversations are getting to a place where, the business understands what's next, and the supplier also knows, what is needed from them. And so it's been a great process to kind of learn that that's a key driver of all of this. The next piece is really ensuring that we're evaluating the supplier in the most objective way possible, instead of in a one-sided or subjective manner. And this is, I think, one of the most critical learning lessons. And, there's always an opportunity for the business to give their ideas and thoughts about how a project went or how the relationship is going from a cost, quality, delivery, governance standpoint. However, it's always good to also, really give the supplier a voice in all of this. So a couple of the things we do at Uber to ensure that the supplier is given this voice is we ensure that they're also evaluating themselves throughout the process. We also add a number of qualitative questions to ensure that both the business, the stakeholder, and the supplier have the opportunity to list out what were some of the things that have been going well. What are some of the things that they can, both the business, Uber, or the supplier can work on or improve. And let's have a candid conversation. And that's really where the performance review meeting comes in and really allows you to make that conversation much more objective, much more two-way as opposed to a subjective one-way discussion. And lastly, really ensure that, the SRM tool that you're, and process that you're building out for your organization, make sure it's easy to understand and learn and implement. I think for us, we wanted to make it so easy where a stakeholder or the business actually asks for SRM to be done with their supplier. So a couple of the steps we've taken at Uber is we've worked with Scout to understand if they already have SOPs and documentation in place to understand or learn how to use Scout RFP. We've also built internal SRM SOP guides so that both, the stakeholder and the sourcer knows how to, knows what steps need to be taken in order to run through from start to end an SRM event. And it's pretty granular. So I would say that these are some of the key takeaways that I've had. And more than anything, I can say that, they've been learnings. And I think with every single SRM event that we run, we learn something. And I think that's the best part, because as we continue to run more and more in the system, in Scout, and just in general, we're learning how to get better at running these types of events. And it's making for stronger, longer lasting and more, just more positive relationships with our suppliers. And that's all from my end.
Well, we do have a number of questions. So, folks, one of the things that we're going to do at the end of this session is share all the questions with our presenters. So they will follow up with you. So make sure you keep your questions coming. We'll try and get to some of them as well. And then also, when you exit today's webinar, there is a quick survey. I know a lot of you don't bother filling it out, but there are really important questions in there that we're trying to track down, which is around your travel policies, because that will give us an indication on when people will be willing or able to travel. So I'd really, really beg you all to take the survey at the end. It's good information for the provider to know, and it's also going to be a poll that we can put up. So we've got a couple different ways for you to do it. So make sure that you do take the poll at the end, please. I'd appreciate it. So Roopa, fantastic information, and I like the words of wisdom that you gave to people as well. But why segment? How should you tackle segmenting suppliers? Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, Dawn, I think that's a great question. So segmentation, I mentioned it earlier, but segmentation has been really critical at least here at Uber, because we needed to understand or kind of go through this thought process of understanding and identifying those suppliers that we should focus our energy on. So we have a sea of suppliers, right? Where in different cities, we're in different regions. We work at a global level. So I can tell everyone on this call, there's hundreds of suppliers that we use at Uber. But how do we sift through those suppliers and ensure that we're correctly navigating strategic partnerships if we don't know where to start? So segmentation gives us the opportunity to category by category go through and identify who are those suppliers that are so critical to our business. They're providing so much value that, we might not be able to operate our business model the same way potentially without them. And I can say that there are a few suppliers in every single category that we see are that critical for our business, given the way that we've grown and the structure, the structure of our organizations today.
Interesting. So, and this is on a worldwide basis as well, right? So this is on a global basis that you do this.
That's right. So the way, our suppliers are really looked at is we have, this global central team, and then we have our regions. We have EMEA, LATAM, APAC, and the U.S., Canada. And we look at all of these different regions. We look at, our suppliers also at a global central level. And we say, okay, we're going to look at it from that standpoint. And then we're also going to look at it categorically. And so by those two, kind of looking at those two models, where can we now segment, in the different categories by, again, IT, facilities, marketing, professional services, et cetera?
Well, that's got to be a lot to think about because those regions are so different. So, someone has asked, and I think this is great, if you had one piece of advice for a successful program, what would it be, and how has this helped Uber?
That's a great question. So my piece of advice kind of goes back to the last slide I just presented, and I would say a couple things here. So I'm not going to give just one piece for the individual that asked. I'm going to give a couple here. The first one is really think through how to build out this SRM framework for your company based off of how your company is structured. And take the time up front to really understand what is it going to take in order to implement this correctly. I'll tell this group a lot of pre-work was done before we even did our first SRM event. And the reason that is because we wanted to make sure that we were kicking it off with a good foundation where we could go back and we could make the tweaks, but the overall process was there. And so I would say that take the time to understand, take the time to, have internal interviews with other sourcing teammates. Take the time to interview different stakeholders, see what they're trying to really achieve from a process like this. The more information that you can get up front, I think the better and more robust your SRM framework will be in a positive way for your organization. So take that time, do those internal stakeholder or sourcing interviews, and get a sense of what have people done in the past. What would they like to see? What are they nervous about? And how can SRM really improve it? So that's one piece of advice. I would say the other piece of advice is really, take the time to just really focus on educating your stakeholders and your suppliers about this process. Before any of our SRM events, we actually get on the phone with our supplier and we get on the phone with our stakeholders and we talk through the entire process. At Uber, we've built out a 7-step, not to confuse with the 7-step sourcing process, but a 7-step framework as to how to actually integrate and how to actually build and lead an SRM engagement from start to finish. And I would say that we've benefited greatly from that because it gives people a very direct understanding of, okay, what happens in step one? How do you even launch something like this? How do you actually have those conversations with, your supplier partner? And in this framework that we built, we even list out who the process owner is. So is the process owner sourcing for that step? Is the process owner the stakeholder? Is the process owner the supplier? And that's really helped guide, all of the individuals involved in that SRM event, as to what happens next. So I can say those have been pretty valuable, valuable learnings that I've had in terms of building out this SRM playbook for Uber. And in general, I would say that the biggest learning and takeaway from SRM is that it really gives a voice to everyone who's touching that relationship. And that's been a huge takeaway and again, eye-opening because we've been able to learn so much from everyone who kind of touches that relationship and is in the day-to-day.
Yeah, that's fantastic information for you to have. So a follow-up on that is, were there what were the surprisingly easiest and hardest parts of establishing your SRM process? Was there anything easy?
That's a good. Yeah. So there was actually. So I think that the easiest part was that was actually on the sourcing side. So Uber, Uber has. There's already a wealth of knowledge sitting on the Uber sourcing team. So we have a set of sourcers who, have all kind of done SRM either in their previous work or were doing some sort of SRM at Uber. And so they all really understood a general way of doing an SRM event. Even though we weren't using Scout, there was a process that they had. And so it was actually really great when I was having those, I'll call them kind of these sourcing interviews, because there was so much that kind of went into those discussions, and I was able to learn very quickly what was kind of that unique approach that each of these different categories was doing. IT was doing something very different between hardware and software. Marketing was doing something very specific for creative agencies, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So in having these discussions with each of the sourcers, I was able to really quickly pick up on what are some of those, key takeaways that we need to implement within their specific templates. And I took those, I took those takeaways and I basically helped to build out each of these different category templates within Scout so that we would have, all of the different questions and evaluation criteria that they ask already included in the templates itself. From a challenging or from a hard, kind of from a harder standpoint, I would say that it's really getting folks to it's getting folks to really buy into a process. While we were doing SRM, it was, again, being done differently across each category. It's hard to, get one scalable solution and get everyone to be trained on it and buy into the process. So I did have a bit of a challenge with that. How do you actually build materials that are going to be easy to use, easy to learn, easy to implement? And I will say that in-person or trainings via Zoom or in-person trainings was a critical component to this. And at first I kind of had this big, obstacle ahead of me of how do I actually train everyone in the company to do this? But then I learned, it's actually about finding those key players in each of the categories that actually touch these suppliers on a kind of a day-to-day account and focus on training them. And I got a lot of pushback at first because I don't think individuals saw that there was going to be a huge opportunity to something like this. But once you start to explain it and once you show the materials and educate in the correct fashion, then you're able to achieve it. And I can say that stakeholders are now knocking on our door to do SRM in many ways. So.
Oh, that's a huge thing for them to want you to do it. I like that.
Yeah.
So, Ahmad, how about a question for you? And this one is, how is Scout used to address vendor management, specifically for compliance?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Don. So this is where some of the onboarding and forms functionality come into play within Scout. So as I mentioned earlier, you can collect information like SOC reports, business continuity information, even environmental or minority-owned business information, and assess that with your stakeholders on a continuous basis. And you can even rerun some of those forms in the future to recollect and assess at a future point. What's really great about some of this functionality that many of our customers actually in response to COVID have been using this functionality to quickly grasp the health of the supply base, being able to throw forms back out and say, how have your response times changed, if any? Are you still able to ensure the quality or delivery of goods and services? And that's really just, again, helping them assess where things are at and potentially pivot, to maybe the alternate use of suppliers if they have to do that. So a really, really great tool to be able to measure that kind of level of compliance.
And I don't know how people would do without a tool. With the pandemic and your supply chain so disrupted, if you didn't have a tool like Scout, how do you do it? I mean, it's crazy.
Yes, it's
that's an observation.
Sometimes
difficult you don't have to comment.
No, I know, but I was even just going to say it's difficult to fathom sometimes how, especially when we see a lot of customers coming from manual processes and have heavy reliance on spreadsheets, even how they were able to keep track of everything, and kind of doing so in a way that is just kind of somewhat structured and in a way that the entire business has visibility into. So yeah, it's I don't know how some folks do it without Scout for sure.
Yeah, I'm always surprised when I find out that somebody's still using just spreadsheets. So it's crazy in today's day. So Roopa, another question for you. What are your next plans? How will your program evolve from here? And what should we anticipate ours looking like in the future?
Yeah, so I think we're still trying to figure out what the next steps are too. But really kind of an immediate next step is how do we continue to ensure that we are rolling out SRM for our strategic suppliers. So as of now, we've done SRM events with a few of our strategic suppliers, some of our tier 2 suppliers, and then when the business asks, it could be a tier 3 or a tier 4 supplier in some cases, but if the business asks, we're really just trying to launch as many SRM events as possible. So we'll take it, we'll do it. And I think the goal is really to get through as many of our, SRM events as possible with our strategic suppliers and start to build out a cadence, right? So we've talked a lot internally about, do we add language into our SOWs with our suppliers that are strategic and say that we will do, an SRM event on a quarterly or semi-annual basis, and starting to kind of make it almost part of our contracting process so that there's some sort of kind of valid baseline of a way where we are kind of doing this evaluation on an ongoing basis. And I think those are kind of the two items, right? So how do we build this in contractually, and how do we continue to just spearhead this effort with our most strategic suppliers?
Oh, good. So you mentioned a 7-step process. Would it be possible to share that with the SIG community, that we could put it out in the SIG Resource Center? Absolutely, yeah. It's something that I can definitely share, and I think it's helped us a lot. And every company may be different. This is the model that really worked with Uber, given the conversations that we had with our stakeholders, with our other sourcers. But I think it's actually a very good framework to use when you start to consider building out some sort of a framework like this. So definitely, yes. Good. Thank you so much. And we'll make sure to get that out to everyone who's on the call today and on the webinar. So, Ahmad, hold on one second. I'm sorry, this is for Roopa. Can you just share, because you've been so open about this, your lessons learned from implementation. In hindsight, is there something you wish you did differently?
I think that there's probably a lot of things that I could have done differently. Let me think about that one, Dawn. So I think really from my end, it was probably that I didn't really talk to the suppliers as much about about SRM as much as I spoke with, our internal folks about SRM. And so I've learned a lot from our suppliers actually in doing these different SRM events. And, they've been actually very open to giving feedback and talking through, what they'd like to see, what they, maybe would do differently, or they even have experience doing it with different companies, right? So we've learned a lot from the supplier side. And so I spoke a little bit about some of these interviews that we did up front, really with the stakeholders and the sourcers, but I don't think I had as much conversation with some of our suppliers. And if you think about it, our supply base is probably doing this more than we are, and they're probably responding to so many SRM events, if they're strategic in nature. And so they have a lot that they've learned that they can probably share about their experiences. So I would definitely say that's one. It would probably take me a little bit longer to think about others, but again, there's so many learnings that happen along the way. I've tweaked our SOPs. I've tweaked, our 7-step process internally here, and I've done a lot of that over time based off of a lot of the lessons I've learned. And so I really think it's an iterative process, and you are going to, sometimes fall flat on your face. Especially in the first few SRM events, I didn't educate our stakeholder as well as I needed to in the first, I think, 2 or 3 SRM events on Scout RFP. So we did have a couple challenges there, but after I learned, about what they needed education on, I was able to build that into the SOP, and we really don't see any problems today in terms of how the stakeholder leverages Scout. So it's great, and it's actually become a very seamless process.
That's great, but I will tell you what I think is interesting is that you say that they're going through a lot of this, but I think the individual people, the company might be, but individual people, that own your relationship may not have had a lot of experience, because we're seeing a lot of suppliers signing up for our relationship management education course because they're not even sure what it means. So it's a little bit different, view of it from our perspective. So folks, in the lower right-hand corner, I don't want to distract from the conversation, but we do have the travel poll. We will be publishing this and letting you know where the trend and the feelings are. And so go ahead and click that, please, before you leave. And then, Ahmad, I just had another one come. We've got dozens and dozens of questions, so I'm just scrolling through to try and find a fast one since we're almost out of time. And you've got some interesting follow-up. So one person has 30 suppliers and wants to justify the tool. The other one has 2,000 suppliers and wants to get the tool. So, so we've got a really big range here. So, Ahmad, with the APIs, can you pull in spend data to run spend analysis as part of doing the spend segmentation?
Yes, I believe you can. I would be happy to provide some documentation, following the webinar on that. And just so everybody's aware as well, I believe we also have an integration now with Supplier as well, one of our partners who is a specialist in spend analysis. So you can very much do more advanced spend analysis in partnership with them as well, if that's something that folks are interested in.
Oh, that's right. I've read about that. That's good. Okay, folks, we are going to wrap up. If you could just take the poll, we're going to go ahead and push the slide deck to you. So you're going to see a square box, and that will allow you to download the slides to your desktop directly. But then tomorrow, we'll also send you a link to the recorded webinar that you can go ahead and share with other folks. And as always, Scout, you always bring us the best presenters. And Roopa, you were fantastic. Aman, you were fantastic as well. So I want to thank you both for your time today. Very educational, full of so much good information. We have so many questions that have come in. So folks, they will follow up with you. But yeah, I think people just want to sit down with you, Roopa, and the two of you, Aman, and just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. So we could have been here for hours, but I want to honor the time commitment. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so
yes,
much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, you guys were both fantastic. So I enjoyed my time with you. And with that, folks, please answer the poll, download the deck, and we'll just keep the conversation going. Scout will be at a number of our other events, and I want you to keep hearing from them. Like I said, everybody just raves about Scout. So with that, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you online very, very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.